Franklin. He's a partner with Gotham Government Relations, a law and communications firm in New York in the United States. Shai, thank you very much indeed for joining us. No doubt you and indeed many people in the United States will be following developments in Israel very closely indeed. I know that Joe Biden spoke about this earlier, where he said he didn't have concerns that the country would descend into civil war. But it does appear that this one is a thorny issue that's not going to go away, regardless of the announcement by Benjamin Netanyahu a few moments ago.
Yes, the Netanyahu announcement was made under duress. This is not something that he planned to compromise on. It is not something that he planned to delay. Less than 2 days ago, he fired his defense minister because the defense minister said they should delay it. Not that it was wrong, but that they should delay it so that the country doesn't break apart. So President Biden is a little circumscribed in what he can say publicly because as the number one ally of Israel, he wants to remain in a constructive role. And even though I think the bulk of Israelis, even some of Netanyahu's coalition supporters, are on the side of tapering back this judicial reform, as Netanyahu calls it, nevertheless, the president is he wants to be able to remain kind of above that fray, and so he urged all sides to compromise. But the compromise is not actually a compromise between two different sides. The compromise is between the existing status quo, where there is at least a semblance of separation of powers between the judiciary and all other government agencies that are basically controlled by the majority of any election. And that is the status quo. What Netanyahu wants is to basically take the judicial check and balance away so that there would be no checks and balances. The compromise would be that there would be some diminution of judicial oversight, some backstop. There would be less of a backstop. So the compromise is not really a compromise. The compromise would be a compromise on democracy and the rule of law. Netanyahu, it appears now, is going to unfire his minister of defense, partly because he needs a competent minister of defense for national security purposes. And Yoav Gallant, the currently former defense minister, is a highly decorated general in the Israeli army, retired. So he's trying to piece things together. Pushing this off by a month or two is not going to change things. But this is Netanyahu's general approach. He does not take a long strategic look. He is focused on staying in power, on staying in control day to day. And that has been his modus operandi for many years. And that's why he got back into power now. That's why he wants to stay into power. Whatever promises he needs to make today, he'll worry about fulfilling them tomorrow or next month.
And of course, the criticism behind all of this is that these reforms are, in part, at least, being pushed forward by Benjamin Netanyahu for the benefit of himself, because he's currently on trial for corruption.
That's right. And ironically, the one bill that has already passed, which passed last week, is a bill that it precludes the Supreme Court from declaring a prime minister incompetent or compromised in some way so that he has to step aside. Now, that could come to a head when the Supreme Court overrules that, and Netanyahu wants to have the Knesset vote to be able to overrule any overruling by the Supreme Court. So that could be a constitutional crisis that comes up in the coming weeks. But also Netanyahu, he's in power now partly to keep himself out of jail, as you said. And ironically, even if there were a valid case for reforming the judiciary, the idea that a prime minister who is currently on trial for public corruption and abuse of public trust, the idea that that prime minister would be the one to bring in this judicial reform, I guess we would call that a bit rich.
Yes, I mean, he went at great pains to suggest that he will turn over every stone to find a solution to all of this. He called for peaceful demonstrations at what he says are a dangerous crossroads for Israel. So he's essentially encouraging everybody to act responsibly, but protesters, it seems, really have the energy for the fight right now, not just in Tel Aviv, but across the country. Is there a sense that things have changed now and the government are on the back foot with this legislation?
Politically, for sure. But this kind of doublespeak of Netanyahu continues even now, even in this moment of consequence for the future of Israel. He said that these demonstrations in support of his judicial overhaul that are going on right now, that nobody asked these people to come. The idea that he even had to say that nobody asked them to come, it makes it obvious that, of course, they were asked to come. This was all organized by Netanyahu's Likud political machine. And then this idea that there's a violence. The violence we've seen is mostly police who are doing crowd control, and the opponents of the judicial overhaul have not really been violent. They've lit some bonfires and stuff, but there hasn't been a lot of violence. The violence we're seeing, I think, is going on right now by Netanyahu's own supporters, as was witnessed by your own correspondent.
And just a final point then, Shai, we know that his coalition partners, perhaps there have been some tense negotiations ongoing because Netanyahu was supposed to address the nation this morning. So there's been some considerable delay to his announcement that these proposals will be delayed, although Itamar Ben-gvir has said that his party have only agreed to the delay of the legislation on the condition that it will be brought up again in the next sitting of the Knesset. Now, I know there's a recess for Passover next week, but essentially that means we could be facing this legislation being put through, in 2 weeks' time? Yes, in 2 weeks' time, or 3 weeks perhaps after the end of Ramadan at least. That'll make it a little easier in terms of any possible Palestinian protests. Notably, Palestinians have been left out of these protests as an issue for democracy and rule of law. That's separate. But after Ramadan, it'll be easier to focus on just what's in store for Israeli democracy. Ben-gvir is used to being almost a literal bomb thrower from outside of government. This is his first time in government, so he has little experience in government, and it's generally very difficult for the bomb throwers to come inside and start making policy and seeing it through. He's already had to unfire the police commissioner, who he fired in the recent weeks. And now it looks like he's going to lose some of the control that he was given over the West Bank. Is going to now revert to the Minister of Defense. He wants to save face, Ben-gvir, but I think Netanyahu can take advantage of the fact that Ben-gvir does not have much experience in these internal dealings and political machinations. Okay, Shai Franklin, thank you very much indeed, as always, for your contributions to TRT World on this breaking, developing story. No doubt we will speak again in the coming days.